Hi, folks. My name is Elizabeth Whiting. I am your instructor for ethical decision making and conflict management. And I am so glad that you have decided to take this course. And I cannot wait to meet you in a live way over Zoom at one of our live sessions. So the purpose in this module, I want to give you some information you need to succeed and hopefully enjoy the course. And I want to kick off a conversation about the role of hope in leadership in the face of conflict. So let's start with introductory material. The overarching question that we will be investigating in our time together is as follows. How can I make decisions about responding to conflict in some organization I belong to so as to promote justice, equity, and inclusion? So that's the connection between decision making and conflict management. Hold on, let me say that one more time. How can I make decisions about responding to conflict in ways that promote justice, equity, and inclusion in the organizations I belong to? So that's the tie between decision making and conflict management. The emphasis in this course will really be on conflict management, and the decision making is really in that context. So that's the focus, because decision making is just too big. Conflict management is already a very big topic, but if you try to do all kinds of decision making and all conflict management together, you'll just be overwhelmed. So by the end of this course, you will don't expect yourselves to be expert conflict managers. That's not what we're shooting for. But what I do hope you have is the ability to make sense of the chaos that arises when people are caught up in conflict, and that you'll be able to make plans to constructively engage that conflict, and that you will have the resources you need to find calm and well-being and the ability to stay purposefully engaged in a conflict over time. And that's where the real learning is going to happen, when you have the ability to stay with conflict and learn how to be the most constructive version of yourself and the most effective leader in the face of that conflict. But we're just going to get you set up so that you can hang in there and keep on learning as you go, as I am doing, and as we are all doing, and will do for the rest of our lives as conflict practitioners. So I should tell you something about me. My name is Elizabeth Whiting. I have a PhD from the Ethics and Society course of study from Emory University's Religious Studies Department, and I studied religion, conflict, and peace building. I'm trained as a mediator in the state of Georgia, though I have not practiced as a mediator. I have participated in restorative justice circles and some restorative justice organizations as a citizen. And these days I am working hard at the School of Medicine to bring restorative practices to student life and processes there. It's an ongoing project, but I'm working on it. And I originally was working with Jill Craneshaw, the ombuds at Wake Forest University, to design this course. And I wish she were here with us because she brings incredible practical experience. But she did contribute the beautiful prose that you will read throughout the rest of this module. And I believe that we'll have the gift of her company later on in the semester for one of our live sessions. You'll notice that the rest of this module focuses on hope. And it is, I do think learning conflict management skills is an incredibly hopeful thing to do. One of the greatest gifts of my life has been that I had the luxury of a lot of leeway in my education to follow where my interests took me. And I found, even from the time I was in undergrad, that I was always interested in people who could tell me how to do conflict better. Because I like most people, as I was watching the people in my life growing up, I didn't see a lot of great models of conflict. I saw some people who managed conflict by kind of losing control and exploding, and I knew I didn't want to do that. And then I saw people who managed conflict by just keeping their heads down and avoiding it at not all costs, but as frequently as possible. And neither path seemed like a way to get my needs met. And I really wanted to be able to get my needs met while maintaining good relationships with other people. And the more I learned about conflict management and mediation and listening skills and managing a discussion, the more I found I was able to get my needs met in the face of conflict and to help organizations that I cared about function well in the face of conflict. And it is my hope that you all feel better equipped to do that at the end of this course. So please do let me know how I can support you in getting there. I want to just tell you, I don't want to stay on this video too long because I want you to be able to get to the actual material, do some good reading and some good writing about hope and leadership and conflict. But I do want to give you two things. So sort of an overview of the course as a whole, the narrative arc, as some of my professors would say, and to acquaint you with the flow of each week, which will be fairly standard. So here is an overview of the course as it is listed in your syllabus. All right, so in week 1, that's where we are right now, we'll talk about hope, leadership, and conflict. So we want to start with our goals in mind, like why are we doing this? And then we'll move into a key concepts week. So that'll just help us kind of give us the basic ideas we need to be having constructive conversations with each other going for the rest of the semester. Then we'll get into the real meat of it in week 3, which is when we will start to talk about the role of trust and trust building in leadership toward equitable and inclusive organizations. So that's really what we're shooting for, building trust so that equity and inclusivity are possible in organizations. So that's the big goal, but that doesn't tell us how to get there. In weeks 4 through 8, we'll be working on how to get there. And we'll learn about finding calm personally. So how can I maintain some equanimity while I am facing short, medium, and long-term conflict? Then we'll do a week that I think of as the mapping and meeting week. How do we figure out where the decision makers in an organization are, and how do we engage them so that we can achieve the change we're shooting for? We'll talk about building power. We'll talk about actually, once you have the actual meeting set up, who you need to talk to make a change. How do you manage the conversation there? And then we'll end with making plans and reviewing those plans and having a chance to process what we've learned together. So that's the flow of the semester. By the time we get done, you'll be in a place where you're like, I can read this situation, I can manage my own emotions, I can make a plan. And that's when the work really starts, after you get done with the course. But within each module, within every week, it will follow a similar rhythm. So every module will have some material for you to watch or read, maybe a quiz for you to take. And as you go along through each module, not this one, but most modules, you'll have a chance to fill out a worksheet. Now, I hope you don't feel patronized by the worksheet. The reason I've set this up as a worksheet is because it cuts out extra work that you don't need to do. I don't need y'all to learn how to write a paper. I don't need you to know how to make a podcast. I do need to help you learn how to analyze a conflict. And I need to help you select tools for making a plan in the face of a conflict. And just the most straightforward way to do that is just a worksheet. So every week there will be a worksheet. They're fairly in depth, and my goal is for them to be useful to you and to just cut out any material that is not essential to those learning goals. Along those same lines, pay attention to the instructions with your reading, because in general, if you just see the reading, then just read what's there. But often I'll have instructions that say, read pages 61 through 65. So you may have an entire chapter posted to Canvas, but you don't have to read the whole chapter. You just have to read the designated pages. Or other times I'll say things like, review this whole chapter, but I've highlighted the chunks you really need to hone in on. So do keep an eye out for those instructions, because they will make your life easier. Again, my goal is to use your time as efficiently as possible. so that you get what you need to achieve the learning goals and you don't have to spend time on stuff that is, yeah, interesting, but not particularly relevant. And that way, I hope that that doesn't stymie your curiosity. I hope that just leaves you more time to follow where your particular version of curiosity leads you. Anyway, keep an eye out for those instructions. And with that, I believe you have what you need for the rest of the module. Please feel free to reach out to me via email. I'm happy to set up a phone call or a Zoom call, and I look forward to seeing you at our live session. Take care.